Hi, everybody. My name is Tengfei, and I'm from Rutgers. And first of all, thank you so much, the conference organizers, all of you, for this wonderful conference and giving us the opportunity to present our paper. The paper is called Female Equity Analyst and Corporate Environmental and Social Performance. This is a collaboration with Kai, Feng, Gabriel, and Chelsea. I'm also happy Feng and Chelsea are here as well. So from today's presentations, we know that there's an increasing popularity of ESG investing, which let me recall when I worked at Invesco 2 years ago, they were hiring even a title called ESG analyst. So I guess the ESG investing requires not only shareholders, but all stakeholders, collective wisdom and actions. So which lead us to focus on analysts. Because analysts are known for their important role in financial market, such as their information interpretation and discovery role. And they also help to mitigate agency problem and improve corporate investment innovation strategies and even workplace safety. And in this paper, we're trying to answer one question: what's the role of female equity analysts, specifically in the corporate, in enhancing corporate environmental and social performance? What do we find? We show that there is a positive and significant association between a firm's female analyst following and its environmental and social performance. And we find that these relations are very likely to be causal because after an exogenous drop in female analyst coverage due to broker closure, firms have around a 7% decrease in environmental and social performance. And in terms of underlying economic mechanisms, we use machine learning to find that female equity analysts are more likely to discuss ES issues in their analyst reports and on their earnings conference calls. So we conclude that female equity analysts play a unique and significant monitoring role in enhancing corporate ES policy. Starting with the classical paper, Jackson and McLean 1976, which show that equity analysts are very important, play a very important governance role in mitigating agency issues. But there could be an unintended consequence, which is short-termism. Because managers feel the pressure to meet earnings target set by analysts. So there's some stream of literature show that because of the pressure, managers show some myopia behavior, such as reduce in innovation, R&D, even maybe social responsible activities. We wonder whether maybe those results are likely to be driven by male analysts, because in this profession, only 10% of analysts are female on average. And this ratio, this representation doesn't change much from 2010 even to 2020. I remember in 2010, the representation of female is 9%. Right now, it's around 10 and 11%. So there's not much going on. We're trying to focus on the female analyst monitoring role. Why females? Because there's well-documented gender differences in values. When it comes to environmental issues, females are more likely to support environmental friendly policies, and women are more patient and when trading off present versus future values. In terms of social dimension, women are more likely to support social welfare, education, health programs, minority, unemployed, and the poor. Females are more benevolent and support more gender equal culture. So taken together those evidence, we think the gender differences in values is actually in nature is consistent with the nature of environmental and social policies, which is benevolent and long-term value-enhancing strategies. So we conject that the gender differences in values and delayed gratification suggest that compared to male equity analysts, female equity analysts will be more likely to care and express their concerns about a firm's environmental and social issues. So given they are important role in financial market, manager whose firms with more female analysts following will pay more attention, therefore invest more in environmental and social policies. So our hypothesis is there as follows. There is a positive association between female equity analysts following and a firm's environmental and social performance. So how female analysts can play a role, we think there could be two channels by voice. First one is we think female equity analysts are more likely to discuss environmental and social issues in their analyst reports compared to their male counterparts. And secondly, on earnings conference calls, they would like to ask more questions about environmental and social issues as well. And we're going to use machine learning to test this. And to test our mean hypothesis, we collect ESG data and analyst gender data. So our final sample consists of our 20,000 firm year observations representing our 3,500 firms over the period 2005 to 2021. Our key measure is the corporate ESG, ES performance come from Refinitiv ESG data set, which is commonly used. And we also use other data set. We find a consistent result. When it comes to analyst gender, it's not an easy task. So we spend a lot of effort to match Abby's data set with analyst full name. You know, analysts only provide masked broken names and the analyst names, analyst last name and first name initials. So we need to find analyst full name and their profile in Capital IQ Professional. There's a long story, but make it shorter. In the end, when we are able to unmask over 10,000 analysts' full names and their gender. This is about 84% matching rate. So just give you some short summary statistics. The average number of female analysts following a firm is about 0.8. And in our sample, around 1/3 from year observations have at least female equity analysts following. In terms of ratios, the average female ratio of analysts is about 7.3%. Then use this data, we regress 1 year ahead environmental and social score on the number of female analysts following. This is our baseline result. As you can see, there is a positive and significant relation in terms of economic significance. One standard deviation increase in female analyst coverage is associated with 3% increase in 1 year ahead ES performance. And put it into number, increase one female analyst coverage will have the firm's ES score increase by 3.6%. This is a non-trivial effect, but this relation could be endogenous. So we use an exogenous shock of broker closures to resolve this concern. The concern is that there could be a reverse causality. Female analysts are could choose to cover firms with higher ES scores. So we use the quasi-natural experiment of broker closure, which unlikely be driven by a particular firm's ES score. And our treatment, and this natural experiment is widely used in the literature, including our discussant Jack's paper as well. So our then we use a difference in differences design. Our treatment firm is a firm that having a drop in female analyst coverage because of broker closure, and our control firm are much firms without a drop in female analyst following. And we compare before the broker closure and after broker closure. This table shows that an exogenous shock, exogenous broker closure indeed reduce female analyst coverage, and this is our mean result. So we regress ES score on the interaction term of the treatment dummy variable and the after dummy variable, and the interaction term is negative. It suggests that after an exogenous drop in female equity analyst coverage, there's a drop in corporate ES performance. In terms of economic significance, firms with a drop in female analyst following have a 7% decrease in the environmental and social issues. Therefore, we think these relations are very likely to be causal. In additional analysis, we also use instrumental variable, changes on change regression to put more weights on the causal relations. So after establishing the causal effects, we explore the channel by using machine learning. Specifically, we apply a machine learning model recently developed called Feng-BERT. So BERT is a sentence embedding algorithm that captures this sentence relation, not just word relations. A Feng-BERT is the application of BERT into finance context. And this picture gives you just a very simple example. When you put a sentence into the model will classify the sentence with a probability. Like this one, the analyst is asking about recycled materials, which is classified as environmental issues. But one of the issues of Feng-BERT is that when you apply Feng-BERT to specific domains like analyst reports and earnings conference calls, you need to fine-tune the model. So the next step, we fine-tune the Feng-BERT model using active learning. So active learning is a human-in-the-loop machine learning approach which in short summary is humans interactively classify training samples and get a cleaner training sample through this seems like very complex loop. But at the end of the day, we want to get a better classification of environmental and issue discussions in analyst reports and earnings conference calls. Then we convert those sentence classifications into two measures. Applied to our mailing analyst reports and our 50,000 earnings conference calls. This gives you a general picture about the temporal trend. You can see there is an upward trend in both data sets. This picture shows the important keywords in the Feng-BERT ESG model. As you can tell, those words are closely related to environmental issues and social issues. Next, we want to use this textual-based measure and to see whether female analysts ask more ES questions than their male counterparts. So there's two variables. The first one is having ES sentences, which is dummy variable, in analyst reports, whether there is environmental and social issue discussed. And the second one is a continuous variable, the number of sentences about ES issues. The regress for the female dummy variable, we find that, yes, indeed, female equity analysts are more likely to ask environmental and social related questions than their male counterparts. Similar result and even bigger result are found on earnings conference calls. And taken together, we show that female analysts discuss more about environmental and social issues than their male counterparts. We also do some additional analysis where we see what's the motive for female analysts to do this. Do they have a better career? I know Feng has a fantastic paper on analyst career concerns. So however, we found that this is not the case. Female analysts discuss more about the environmental and social issues by preference, not by their career incentive. They don't have a better career outcome in terms of all-star status and forecast accuracy. So taken together, there's a couple of things I know. This last paper, you are waiting for the dinner, right? So making sure, there's two things I want to highlight. The first one, we use a very large sample, maybe the largest in the literature, to show that there could be a causal relation that female analysts play a unique role in enhancing corporate environmental and social performance through their voice in analyst reports and earnings conference calls. What's the final takeaway? The final takeaway is female analysts play a monitoring role in ES performance, considering there are only 10% analysts are female in this profession. Hypothetically thinking, if increasing female equity analyst performance from 10 to 50%, corporate ES performance would increase at least 15%. That's non-trivial. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me here. As you can see, I also have something green on the slides to echo like Tracy's call for St. Patrick's Day. So I'm the last speaker of the day. It's a little bit unfortunate because I usually tend to over-prepare for my discussions. So I hope everyone can still stay energetic and at least awake when I go through my 30 pages of lengthy discussions. Just kidding, I don't have that many slides. All right. The main idea of this paper is actually very straightforward. Okay, it asks to whether do female equity analysts actually have a causal effect on firms' environmental and social performance, and the answer they found is yes. Female analyst coverage indeed has a positive impact on firm-level E&S performance. And to establish causality, the authors make use of brokerage closures as an exogenous shock to the loss of female analysts. And this is a very standard identification strategy in the analyst literature. To explore the possible channels, the authors find that female analysts are more likely to discuss E&S issues in their reports and also raise more questions about E&S during earnings conference calls. So overall, I think this is a very fun paper to read. I really enjoyed it. In fact, it addresses a very interesting and also trendy topic, right? As you can see, the paper actually combines all kinds of hot ingredients of the recent financial research, like gender, ESG, machine learning, right? What else can you ask, right, for a single paper? And the empirical work is also very carefully and competently done. The writing is super clear and easy to follow. And in addition, the paper also adopts a very cool and novel machine learning approach to examine the actual analyst behaviors, like how they write their analyst reports and what type of questions they ask during the earnings conference calls. So overall, there were many aspects of the paper I like, and besides it has just won the Best Paper Award, so it makes my job actually more difficult. But as a discussant, of course, I have to give some comments. So next, I will briefly talk about how to better position the paper into the literature and how to discuss more about the underlying economic mechanisms. Okay, so my first comment is, since it is a very trendy topic, right? The unfortunate thing is the space is easily getting crowded, right? As you can see in the literature, there has already been papers that look at the general analyst coverage and their effect on corporate social responsibility, like CSR, that is closely related to the ENS that's analyzed here. And there has also been a large body of literature that looks at the effects of females, like female directors, managers, executives, CEOs, leaders, how those affect firms' ENS, ESG or CSI performance. So there is a Journal of Corporate Finance paper in 2016 whose title is The Causal Effect of Analyst Following on Corporate Social Responsibility. And for identification, he also looks at brokerage closures and mergers. So it's very similar, like in flavor, to the current research. And of course, there is also a huge literature that looks at different female leaders, how that affect firms' ESG and CSR practices. And a lot of them not published in terms of top finance journals, but still I think it's worth discussing this related literature, this emerging literature. Of course, the good news is that there were no other studies that specifically look at female analyst coverage on companies' ESG or CSR. So that's the niche that the paper wants to actually sell. But I have more to say on this point later. Okay, another thing I want the authors to provide more discussions on are the underlying economic mechanisms for their main results. So right now, I think the main channel tests the paper shows is that female analysts tend to pay more attention to ENS issues in their reports and during their earnings conference calls. But I would think that this is only half of the story, because ultimately, analysts are not making the decisions, right, for firms to engage in these ENS activities. It's the managers who ultimately make the decision. So how do the female analysts actually persuade the managers or convince the managers to take these actions? That's another part of the mechanism that the paper wants to discuss or show more evidence for, right? So I think the incentives of the female analysts in promoting firms' ENS performance is pretty convincingly shown by the current paper, right? Using the channel tests and also the arguments from the psychology literature, et cetera. But their ability to influence the managers is less discussed, right? How do the female analysts' ENS preferences, I would say mostly subjective opinions held by these female analysts, similar to their political views, right? How do they really affect the manager's behavior regarding this ENS engagement, right? Do these analysts directly influence the managers, or they try to do it indirectly through influencing the investors, like several of the papers today talked about, right? The investors can also influence the managers, and maybe the analysts affect the managers through the investors, right? If the channel is direct influence, why do the managers respond to the analysts' sort of nudging, right? Is it because the managers are educated about the importance of these ENS issues, right? So previously, they don't really understand the importance of these issues. They did not pay enough attention, and analysts just bring more attention to them and educate them that they should do it. Or maybe the managers ultimately are still not convinced by these analysts, but they still choose to cater to these female analysts' preferences in fear of being punished if they don't do that. If that is the case, what are the potential penalties for the managers, like if they don't listen to the analysts, right? I don't think this sounds like more like a governance story here, because ex ante, I don't think that female analysts should have stronger monitoring or disciplining abilities than male analysts. Maybe there's literature out there, but it's just not that obvious to me. So, and also, if the analysts affect the managers indirectly through influencing investors, can you provide more evidence on the investor behavior, right? For example, their voting behavior on ENS proposals, right? For firms that are covered by female analysts versus male analysts, do you see any differences? So overall, I think that the paper would benefit from providing more discussions on this underlying economic mechanisms, because simply by showing that analysts talk more about these ES issues is not enough, right? We all say a lot of things. Like as discussant, I'm also saying a lot of things to you, right? It's up to you whether to implement these suggestions and comments, right? And a bit of real-world examples or anecdotal evidence would also be make the paper's arguments more convincing. So regarding that, I'm just wondering whether the paper can slightly change the main pitch, because previous literatures on the role of females in influencing those ESG or CSR performance mostly cite the experimental or survey evidence from either the psychology or economics literature. But those evidence are largely based on the claims, right? What the females say, right? Rather than what they actually do. But what's nice about the current paper is the authors actually directly observed the female analysts. They are indeed paying greater attention, right, to these ENS issues in the writing of their reports and also in the types of questions they ask in the conference call. So maybe I think the current paper exploits a unique setting, okay, and adopt a novel machine learning approach to illustrate this basic premise for this large body of literature. So maybe the authors can consider motivating the paper, just start the paper by saying that you are trying to provide direct evidence on the females' tastes or preferences towards these environmental and social issues, and discuss your channel test upfront, because I view this as the most innovative part of the paper. And then you can move on just to examine the firm-level ENS performance as a consequence or outcome of this. I think this probably can lower the hurdle, right, in terms of convincing readers about the contributions or the mechanisms I just talked about on the previous slides. Okay, in terms of empirical analysis, I just have a few things to talk about. Actually, I have a lot, but there are some minor comments that I can privately discuss with you. Okay. I think my biggest concern about this DID approach is that you should further refine the control group, right? Because right now, the control group are those firms that are not affected by the closures. So they're not losing analysts due to the brokerage closures. But I think the control group should be those firms that also lose analysts, but they lose male analyst coverage from the same closing brokerage. Because currently, the treatment effect includes both the effect of losing a female and also the effect of losing any analysts. And we know that losing any analysts can induce a lot of change in information asymmetry, like the influence, the experience of the analysts, et cetera. And maybe that also has something to do with the effect of losing a brokerage firm, right? The brokerage firm may have certain preferences. And here, I don't think matching is not that necessary for your analysis because you control most of the matching variables in your follow-up analysis anyway. And alternatively, the authors can consider performing a placebo test by comparing firms losing male analyst coverage from the same closure event to firms not affected by the closure events. And you should not find any results there, right? If you want to expand your events for these exogenous shocks to the loss of female analysts, you can also consider brokerage mergers. But there, the treated group should be firms covered by female analysts from both merging parties, ex ante. Then after the merger, the merged brokerage firm will tend to get rid of a redundant analyst, right? And the control group, of course, are the firms not in the treated group, but are covered by male analysts from both merging parties. So I think that's something to consider, too. I have some other minor suggestions for the DID approach. In particular, I think it would be helpful if the authors can try to examine the optimality, like the equity value relevance of these ENS policy changes after losing the female analysts. Right? This type of analysis can tell you, like, where do the female analyst preferences come from? Like, is it from their skills, past experience, or it's just their pure taste or behavioral bias, right? It also can tell us whether the managers learn from the female analysts like in a rational way, or they actually get pressured into following their preferences. Okay. And about your channel tests, I'm wondering, like when you analyze the analysts' reports and conference calls, do the female analysts raise their questions or discuss these ES issues in a positive or negative manner? Like, can you actually analyze the tone or the sentiment when they discuss these issues? So if the female analysts are actually holding a negative opinion, right? They're kind of trashing these ES issues. Maybe not likely, okay? But it's worth just checking, like as a sanity check, right? I don't know. Yeah. So I think it would be helpful to at least convince us they're trying to push for more and better ENS performance rather than just criticizing them, right? And also, I think for this test, you need to control for the analyst skills, right? You have already these measures in some of the other tests, right? There are all-star status, there are forecast errors, etc. And I'm also wondering whether you can control for the analyst's political ideology. I know that's probably hard. I'm not sure whether you can look at their political campaign contributions data or something. Yeah. Okay, I have another miscellaneous list of comments for the authors, but I won't talk about here, okay? Okay, so in conclusion, this is a very interesting study. I totally enjoyed it. Gives us a very plausible story and a novel empirical analysis. I just wish the authors can provide more discussions on the contributions of the paper to the literature, and also discuss the specific mechanisms through which the analyst preference can actually influence managerial behavior. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. So you want to respond? Yes.
All right, Jack, thank you so much for all of your comments. They're so helpful. All of your comments are well taken. And that means there is a lot of work to be done, but I think this works well for us. And I wish you are our referee. That's the best thing I can expect of this. There's one thing I would like to add more flavor is that whether female analysts talk about environmental and social issues in a positive, in a negative way, it's maybe a different story, because what we found is that female analysts are more friendly in communication. So in other words, they are nicer. So there could be some discussion there, but that's very good comments that we definitely should follow. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks. Very, very interesting paper. I enjoyed the presentation as well as the discussion. I just want to probably propose one alternative channel which may result the same result. So I want to tell a story from the role congruity perspective, meaning I don't have specific statistics in mind, but I would imagine the analyst profession is male dominant. So the female analysts therefore would have incentives to outperform their male counterparts. Then that would mean they would provide more informative reports, discussions, and more quality discussions in the area. And if this is the case, then the managers they should follow their suggestions if they provide higher quality reports. Another example, for example, my senior colleague, Kathleen, discussed a paper 10 prior discussants have discussed before. There, I would love to imagine, maybe not true, Kathleen had the incentive to outperform those 10 discussants. So I would love to believe that Kathleen's reports would very, very informative, then the authors should follow her suggestions, should be more likely to follow. So this is my story. Just want to hear what the authors may think about this role congruity argument.
I kind of agree. There's some argument about that females have to have a superior ability to get into this profession. What we found here is that female analysts with more experience, from specific experience or general experience, have all with all-star status, have larger voice and larger impact on corporate environment and social issues. I'm not sure I answer your question, but maybe relate to that point. But I appreciate that your point kind of reinforce our story a little bit, right? Appreciate that. Right.
So I have a question. I'm a man, so I'm very critical here. Now, so you get this policy prescription saying that going from 1 woman to 5 women is going to increase everything by 15%. And I just don't know. I mean, as Jack said, you have to understand. Oh, sorry, about there. You have to understand. You have to understand what's the mechanism here, right? Mm-hmm. Because I can see having 1 woman who raises these important issues going to have a big impact. Mm-hmm. Having 5 women, I'm not sure, because you have like 5 times the same thing. I'm sure it's going to be beneficial in many other kind of dimensions, but I just don't think you can make such a strong prescription without understanding the mechanism here. Mm-hmm. I mean, it goes like to the exam solicitations. Having 1 of them, important information. Having 5 of them, like in Apple, I don't know. Mm-hmm. So I'm just, you got to be careful about it. It goes econometrically about local effects versus global effects. Just more careful in this.
Yes, thank you.
But it goes also with understanding the mechanism. Definitely
agree with you, Peter. Think there could be a decreasing marginal effect there. As I said, right. So I agree with you. That's why I said the last sentence in my slides, I called it hypothetically thinking. It's just for policymakers. Because it's not written in our paper. So that's a too strong argument. I agree with you at that point.
Pat?
I want to return to one of the points of the discussion, and sort of there's been a lot that's been written about the effect of analysts on their own, right? There's been a lot that's sort of been written about what analysts do and how they affect corporate policies. And in addition to the test that he suggested being one that's very interesting, there's sort of a second concern with the reuse of natural experiments, right? And so in particular, Davidson Heath has some work on how we have to correct for multiple hypothesis testing. And so one thing you might consider doing as you sort of revise this is adopt their framework to adjust t-stats to account for the fact that there are many papers that have used exactly the same setting. And every time we reuse a natural experiment, we raise the bar for the exclusion restriction, right? And so I think it's going to be really important to sort of look at the literature broadly, and you can use the number of projects written about in a particular setting to adjust for the possibility of multiple hypothesis testing. That's something you might want to look at going forward.
Yes, thank you so much, Pat. That's a very good suggestion.
Question.
So a very interesting paper. I was wondering how your ESG measure, like what is it based on? Is it at all based on like transcripts of analyst calls and maybe management discussion? Because in that case, you know, just the fact that somebody asked you a question about ESG, we'll put that into the transcript and we'll sort of probably mechanically increase your ESG score just because somebody asked you about it and you as a CEO got to talk about it and discuss it. Is that at all a concern or?
That's a good question, but I don't think that's a big concern because all of those ESG data matrices are from firms' voluntary disclosure. Those are in their annual reports, Tengfei filings, company website. What we are using is analyst reports and the earnings conference call. I don't think ESG data winners actually to scribe earnings conference call and to see whether a firm missing that or not. It's more likely in their annual reports or company websites or even in media news. But thank you for that question.
Everyone, so I'm going to give the floor to Fei for the concluding remark.
All right. Well, I guess I came back from the dealership to pick up my car, just in time to catch the last presentation and discussion. So, what a day has been. I hope you enjoyed the conference, enjoyed the presentation, discussions as much as I did. And I'd like to propose that we give, all of our authors and especially our hardworking discussants, a round of applause. And Laura and I actually have been, and I think among the program committee, we have been talking about, setting up a best discussant award. But, at the end of today, I actually don't think we need to. All we need to do going forward is to pick papers that have been presented anywhere with 10 discussants, and then invite 10 discussants like Kathleen. Then I think we're good. Okay? But seriously, I think we may very well, set up a Best Discussant Award to just, give our hardworking and insightful, helpful discussants some way of recognition.
Well,
so
Fei,
really
I have to say, I couldn't pick a Best Discussant. They were all great.
It's so true. It's so true. Yeah, just up the ante just a little bit more. So this marks the end of the formal portion of this symposium. The informal portion of the symposium will start. We're going to carry the fun and the party all the way to Main Street and join our wonderful undergraduate students in green.
So we're gonna be going to a restaurant called Cafe Gelato, and I reserved a room. So if anybody wants to come, we're gonna carpool over.
Perfect.
After.
So that's the plan.
Yeah.
Yep. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you guys next year again. Thank you.